To the Steel Sanctuary podcast. I'm your host, David Barrow from SteelSanctuary.com, and back with us again is Ron Lipbach from Steelers Takeaways. Ron, how you doing?
I am doing well. How are you guys doing?
Good. Thanks for joining us today. Um, we made it, Ron. Training camp starts Wednesday. We got
We're
through
getting
this
there.
off season.
We're close.
It's been brutal. After crazy stuff leading up to the draft and during the draft, it's the news has gone dry. For
Yeah.
us that need content, it's been pretty brutal.
Hurry up and wait. Yeah, exactly.
Since the last time I was on, the Steelers signed Tyler Matakevich. Um, we're assuming it's a special teams deal, obviously.
Yeah.
Interesting deal. Could mean Mark Robinson's days as a Pittsburgh Steeler are coming to a close. I mean, I don't know how many inside linebackers that don't play they have room
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. I'm guessing Holcomb's probably, they already said he's probably not going to be ready until mid-season. So then maybe they put him on PUP for a while or, whatever. It's, they like their special teams guys. So we'll see. But I remember standing next to him once in camp, and I've never stood next to a guy who was as wide as he was tall. I mean, he's just like it's like sitting next to like a living like fire plug. It's just insane how like just stout this dude is. Uh, but yeah, he's a beast for a special team kind of player.
Seem to be taking special teams really seriously this offseason, right? They're bringing Cordero Patterson to return kicks and now go out of their way to bring Matakevich in. I think
Yeah,
they're
I
taking this
do
new
think
kickoff rule.
I do think it's a little bit of a a Holcomb situation where they realize like Holcomb is not going to be ready anytime soon, and Robinson is Robinson's got to earn his way into a spot. Clearly they don't see Robinson as some big time answer with all the moves they made at linebacker. So he's a for all the hype on Robinson, it seems like he's really stayed in that same spot on this team year after year. So which is I mean he's a low round pick and he was a project, and it's not a shock, but yeah, it sort of seems to be a little bit telling.
Yeah. It wouldn't be an off-season Steelers podcast without bringing up Brandon Ayuk at least once. He made his official trade demand this week, and it's sparked all the speculation again. Um, I don't know. I just don't. I still. The longer we go, the less inclined I am to think they're going to actually make this move. I don't know.
I just don't think they want to spend what it takes to get him, and I don't think it's about the pick as much as it is the salary. They've got, look, right now they're rolling on a essentially like a rookie quarterback deal,
Yeah.
and even less than that. So, they got to think about next year if they're gonna if Fields is the answer, whomever it is that they go for. Uh, you know, do they want to just roll over some of this cap space to next year and really have the ability then to sign Hayward and some other free agents and go get another quarterback because they're going to have to. No one's playing next year at the salary levels they're playing this year at quarterback. So they've
Yeah.
and it's not even going to be close. So
Yeah.
they're going to have to figure that out. So I just don't, and they've got Pickens, who I'm sure they probably want to resign. So there's a lot of questions there. There's a guy I think a guy like Robert Woods who could be had for a low pick, who I think could satisfy that number two role. He gets good separation. He's tough, aging, veteran, but it buys him some time to get a guy like that who could still play decently enough to succeed. I think that's the kind of guy that they'll go for. I don't think they've made it clear they're not going to break the bank for a receiver at this stage, I think. So I think people will be disappointed whatever that number two answer is. At least some people will be. So
Yeah, I agree. I think Steelers fans are in for disappointment. I kind of tend to side with you. It's going to be a lower your expectations for the wide receiver too, because it's
yeah.
going to be someone we're not thinking of who's not a top tier guy, who's probably just a play setter. You got to keep in mind George Pickens is going to want a new contract next year, and if he has anywhere near as good a season as he had last year, he's going to get mid to upper 20s
Yeah.
in some kind of extension. So it would be tough to, like you said, you got to pay a quarterback next season and then have two wide receivers if they were to get Ayuk, one at 30 and one at 26, 27, and
I just
then
don't
pay a
think
quarterback.
I don't think it's and they got to sign Fryermuth. They've got to
Freiermuth.
sign Hayward. I'm sure they want. There's yeah. The only other caveat here is if they do go for an Ayuk, let's say, just for shits and grins, we say they do that. And then they let Pickens go because Ayuk signed for 4 or 5 years now because they extended him, and maybe they do something like that, and they feel like, look, if we have to choose between Ayuk and Pickens, we'll take Ayuk. I'm just throwing stuff out there. That'd be the only way I could see them really looking at this deal that way. But again, I think it's going to be a mid-tier guy who could be a decent number two receiver, but not anything that is Ayuk level. Sorry.
Someone floated on, I think it was X, that Alex Highsmith would be thrown in a deal to get Brandon Ayuk. I think it's pretty ridiculous. You can't. You improve your wide receiver spot, and then you absolutely destroy your outside linebacker spot. So you're not. How much are you helping the team at that point?
And it's harder to find a good pass rusher than it is to find a good receiver. It just is.
Absolutely.
I don't think, and I know people thinking like Herbig is going to be really great, but look, the jury's out, and he's also Herbig is undersized. So is he a guy that can last a full season against the run, against the pass, pass rushing as well? And they don't have a fourth linebacker right now. Moon's probably the guy right now, and so they don't have a Golden that they had last year, which is really surprising. That's another move that people I don't know were paying enough attention to, is sort of what's happening at outside linebacker. My guess is, I think they're going to go after a guy. I mean, Herbig's really good, but he's if someone goes down, can he play a full stretch? I don't know. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a move made there. I'm surprised that one hasn't been.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it on the podcast I was on this last time on the Steel Rings podcast. I'm not sold on Herbig yet. He flashed well last year. He did, but that was in very limited. He's, like you said, an undersized guy. Can he play every down if Highsmith will walk get hurt and you have to have him, for all the snaps of the game? I'm not so sure about that. I think
I agree.
And Marcus Golden isn't signed, but by anybody. I don't think he's officially retired. I don't know what the holdup would be to bring him.
Yeah, I don't know. He might be one of those guys who's waiting for the right opportunity. Some of those guys wait, mid-season or early in the season or right before camp, and they want, they don't want to go through the trials of camp, so they'll sign when a team really needs them, and hopefully a contending team like if San Francisco or someone who's really a contender goes down, with an injury, then he can sort of pick and choose a little bit that way. Some guys
make sense. What else do we have? Oh, Warren Sharp put out a list of the most expensive offenses in 2024. Did you see it?
The which one was? I'm sorry, my dogs were really upset at
the most expensive offenses in the NFL for 2024.
Oh, yeah. Pittsburgh holding the bottom.
Steelers finished at 31 out of 32 teams at 80 million per season.
Yeah.
Only the Packers at 78.
I mean, right?
It does. A lot of it is that.
If you had $20-30 million of quarterback costs, which most teams do carry, it's a different story. So, it just begs the question, what's going to happen next year? Because, it's
that number's going up sharply.
It's going up sharply, no pun intended. And it's going to be any of these guys on this roster, right? I mean, if Fields doesn't impress and Wilson doesn't impress, they're going to have to start from scratch. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out. It's unknown.
Yeah, to your point, the Browns are number one on this list at 191 million, and it's Deshaun Watson making 55 of that.
Yeah, and they got a receiver who's holding out. Their best receiver is holding out.
Yep.
So, that shows you, it's not all, it's not always easy to put that together and then keep it together.
Yep. Just to round out the bottom, for people who want to know, the Packers are 78.4. They're the lowest. The Steelers are 80 million. The Chargers, you jump up 10 million. They're 90.6. The Titans are 95. And 28, the Buccaneers are 105.1. So there's a little bit of a gap between even 30 and 31.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you throw a $50 million quarterback on the Steelers roster, they're still, that gets them to 140. They're still 51 million behind the Browns, and the Rams are second at 190.
And it's really young. I mean, you could have 3 guys in their rookie contracts playing it on the line. You have a rookie
Yeah.
rookie contracted receiver. You got a bunch of other guys who aren't getting paid anything because we don't know who they are at receiver. You got two rookie contracts at running back. So there's a lot of rookie contracts, and a lot of that is going to be telling on how they handle the next couple of years because that's where they can they spend 30,000 on Ayuk when or 30 million on Ayuk when they've got all these contracts to deal with. So there's a lot of questions there.
All right. I thought it would be fun because there isn't much going on. I went to betonline.com and pulled up some under overs for the 2024 season for the Pittsburgh Steelers players and stuff. I think you'll find some of these numbers interesting. Some are very low, or seem a little bit out of whack. So we'll jump right into it. The first one, Alex Highsmith, under over 7.5 sacks. 7.5 is what they put for Alex Highsmith. He had 7 last year.
I think he had a down year. I think he gets over 7.5 sacks this year.
I don't think so, right? If he stays healthy,
he better. You got to because you can't count on Watt having 20 plus sacks every year. I think Hayward will be better. I think Benton's going to be better. So I think he has a better season. I think he has to.
Yeah, and when TJ went out for that little period, he struggled.
Yeah,
and then once he got back, he kind of turned it back on. But what else do we have here? George Pickens, 5.5 touchdowns is the under over for next year. He had 5 in 2023.
I think he's going to have more than that this year.
To your point, he better, or else they're in trouble because he's the only one.
Yeah, I mean, the issue with him is if it's Van Jefferson at wide receiver as your second wide receiver, they're going to triple cover him every play. I mean,
yeah. And how long does it take till you get so frustrated with that he wants to kill somebody?
Yeah.
I looked up the numbers, and I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but all other receivers on this roster now had 500 and change yards and 4 touchdowns last year total. That's like 6 guys. Calvin Austin.
It's weird. They all had, with the exception of Austin, of course, they all had like really great, I think 2021 or 2022s. They all, not I would say great, but really good ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then they all just disappeared. It's like it's really strange what's happened to all of these receivers, the Callaways, the Jeffersons, Watkins. They all had really good like years, like 2 or 3 years ago. And then like for 2 years they were like a little bit AWOL. So I don't know what happened with all these guys, but clearly they're trying to catch some lightning in a bottle with one of these guys. But it's I'd be happy if they went and got Woods or someone like that. I'd be happy at this point.
Yeah, I don't know if that was their strategy because I noticed that too. Like 2021, they had good seasons, then they kind of fell off. I don't know if they're trying to uncover some gem that no one else is looking at from they had good stats 2 years ago. What it was, but it is kind of strange.
Yeah.
George Pickens again, under or over 1,000.5 yards. He had 1,140 last year.
Oh, he'll have more than that. Yeah,
I would think so. I think we're in for a monster season, provided the quarterback play doesn't completely, fall off a cliff.
Yeah, I think he'll. I think the run. Yeah, it's the only question. And this is something I was thinking about. I posted a little while ago. Is sort of leads up into this question. Is they've got 8 new starters on this team. Really, 8 positions that will feature new starters on this team, and a lot of that's on offense. So it's going to take time for this offense to gel. They've got 3 positions, not just on the line alone, that are going to be new in terms of fielding new guys to start. And I think it's going to take some time. And, how does that play into all of these numbers, right? Like, does it take a while for this offense to gel, for Wilson and Pickens to get on the same page, for this number 2 wide receiver to help at all enough to take the pressure off of Pickens? All these things, how does that play into this offense, right? But then, he was harking back to the fact that, like, it just can't be worse than last year, right? It's just nothing can be worse than last year. So, if that's the case, then all these numbers have to go up.
Yeah, I mean, just Arthur Smith over Matt Canada alone should be dramatic.
Touchdowns and yards and all the things, yeah.
But you're right to your point that the offensive line and how long it takes that to gel is gonna be a hindrance in some of these stats until maybe they come out of the gate, and play great, but it's the likelihood of that.
In 3 preseason games instead of 4, there's a little bit less time to get yourself acclimated.
How long does it take
Yeah.
Mike Tomlin to figure out the tackle position and who he wants to start. That's another thing. He starts shuffling bodies around.
Yeah, I'd love to see them just say, you know what, we're committing. They've seen them in rookie camp. I think they've got a feel for who they've got enough to. I would just love to see them commit right now and let them gel and let them get on the same page and just roll it out. Start Frazier, start Futanu at whatever side you want, probably right. Get Jones on left and just let's just go with it.
Yeah, I that's the best case scenario for us anyway. I don't know how Mike Tomlin feels about it, but that
Yeah.
seems like it makes too much sense. Let's see. Jalen Warren rushing yards under over 600.5. So I guess they want you to make a decision either over 600 or under 600.
Yeah. Uh
He had 784 last season. It's going to be interesting to see how this division of labor goes with Arthur Smith. And
yeah. I'd say over 600. I mean, again, I just keep thinking like everything's got to be better than last year, even if it's equal to, that 600 is far less than what he did last year. So I just have to
yeah,
believe he'd at least get that.
I wonder where they get that number from that they
Yeah,
decrease it by almost 200 yards.
strange, right? Unless they just think that they're going to run Najee down because he's in his last year of his contract and they just want to use him up.
Actually, the next one is Najee, and they have him at 850, which is again 200 yards less than he had last year. It's odd. I don't know if they expect the Steelers to pass more with
I think
Justin
it's the
Fields,
lack of confidence in the offensive line.
and that could be it too.
A lot of these guys, they don't look at the draft and they don't look at these teams in depth maybe, and so they just say, oh wow, this offensive line is not good. No way I'm speculating. I don't know, but I would say that he'd have more than that as well. I mean, again, they've committed to the run. They've brought in two new starters on the offensive line that have to be upgrades. So it just has to be better.
I think it's over too. What do you think happens to Najee Harris? Do they get a contract extension at all done, or is this it for him in Pittsburgh?
I wouldn't be surprised if he wants out. He just seems disgruntled, and I think the lack of an extension might have been the last straw. Remember, he's not speaking to folks. He's not
Mm-hmm.
speaking to the press. Trying to remember who it was I spoke to, who said in camp he was just off on his own a lot, not talking to guys, uh, not being a jerk, but just like he was just like, you know what, he's off on it. He's not talking to people. I would not be surprised if he wants out. And there are teams that would do well with a guy like him. Tennessee, Baltimore's scary.
Yeah,
There are
Baltimore.
teams
Yeah.
that would, and for me, he's just another one of those guys that, it was interesting because Rashard Mendenhall posted something, and I posted something back about how he wasn't used like he was in college, and he responded back in like that, right? Where
Yeah.
he was like this spread offense back, and they used him a lot in the passing game, and the Steelers used him like Jerome Bettis. I
Yeah.
think they did the same thing with Najee. Now I know Najee's a big back, but he was used a lot in the passing game. He was used a lot in various roles in various ways. One of the things they loved about Najee Harris when they drafted him, they said was that he'd be used in the passing game and all of that. That didn't really happen a lot, not in the way that it felt like he could have been used. I would not be shocked if he wants to go to a place that's going to use him that way and not just run him into the middle of the pile.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
maybe that's in his head.
I think the contract stuff is definitely in his head. I think he wants to go. He wants to earn that big contract. He was part of that whole running back meeting back. What was it, last year or the year before, where they were talking about how they're not getting paid. And
Yeah.
I struggle to figure out what his value is, and then what
Yeah.
really worries me is the usage and how much he's been used. And it seems like an injury just waiting to happen at this point because especially his rookie year. What did he end up leading the league in touches that year? I think by a good margin. So
Yeah.
I think
And I just the problem I have with him is just that he's never going to give you a lot of that big breakaway potential. And if this team is going to pound the ball, and right now anyway, and I know this won't always be the case, but the way this team is constructed, they don't have a real huge big play threat. To have if that's the way this continues, I know they have Pickens, who is in his own way one, but he's not through speed. He's not the guy who's going to take a 10-yard pass and typically break that for a big gain. On occasion, yes, but not more through like odd type plays than through like just playmaking ability that he has. He's a guy who's going to catch the ball downfield in traffic or over a guy's head and make a beautiful catch, but he's not a huge playmaker with the ball, from the way I see him anyway. So if you don't have that in the passing game, you need it in the running game, and that's not what he offers. And so I think that you need to find a guy who's going to allow for that. Derrick Henry allows for that, right? He's still a big dude, but he allows for that because of the speed. I
Yep.
think that's at least he used to. So I think that's what you want in a running back in Pittsburgh. And I'm not sure, he's just not that guy. He's like everything in between. He's a strong back, but not great speed. He's got a little bit of speed, but doesn't always break the tackles you think he should. And he's close to everything you want, but not quite there.
That's a good way to put it. That's exactly what he is. He's good at everything, but not great at anything.
Yeah.
Basically, and it holds him back. Let's move on to the next one. Pat Fryermuth. This. If I was a betting man, which I am from time to time, but we'll see about this one. Pat Fryermuth touchdowns 3.5. He only had 2 last year. He missed some time, obviously. I think this is over. I think this is way over.
I think it's over. The only catch here is the kind of personnel they run, and if they love use a lot of their tight ends under Smith. Would it be Washington who catches a lot of those, or Pruitt, or Rodney Williams, or some other dude, right?
Yeah.
If they're, I think he'll get a lot more receptions and yards than last year. Touchdowns is always tricky, especially for tight end because of how they use personnel. But I'll still go over just because I do think that he's going to be featured more, and I think he's underrated.
I do too. I agree. And let's face it, if as the team stands right now, he's wide receiver 2. And even if they bring in a Robert Woods or something, he's still probably going to be the second leading receiver if he stays healthy and all goes well. So that should lead to at least more than 3.5 touchdowns, I would think.
Yeah, I'd hope so. Yeah. Does a half touchdown of 2-point conversion? Does that count as a half touchdown?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Oh, he gets you need 2 to break the half to make 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll have to ask the odds makers on that.
Speaking of Fryermuth, they have him at 500.5 yards. I go over this one too.
Yeah, I'd go over barring injury. I'd go over that. Yeah.
And that's the caveat with him, is staying healthy.
Yeah.
That could really come back to bite you in the ass if you're
betting. That and his blocking. I mean, there's one other catch there. It's like, if they're really pounding the ball and that's what they want, you got to have him on the field. But like if Smith is just dead set on having this huge blocking tight end crew, and they feel like Washington can be a decent enough receiving threat, which they were sort of touting in camp this year, earlier this year, about how he was improving as a receiver. I could see them trying to push that a little bit, but he's just, having said that, he's not a route runner, or the speed guy that Fryermuth is. So I can't see that, but I could see his, Fryermuth's blocking ability is going to be kind of one of the, that could be one thing that trips all this up a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. What do we got next? Patrick Queen, 125 tackles for Underola. That's quite a bit. He had 133 last year.
I say less. I less.
Do too. I would take under on that one. I mean,
you got Landon Roberts there, or whoever's that other linebacker. I think it's gonna be less.
I think it will be too. He had a good linebackers with him in Baltimore too. It's not like he was playing with
Roquan Smith, who's one of the best. But I don't know. I mean, part of it, we'll have to see how he is in coverage, which I think he's overrated in that aspect. And I don't know how many of those were after the catch tackles. I don't know. But I don't know. I think it's gonna be less, just because I think there's a lot of good linebackers and other folks, and our safeties tend to play close to the line at times. I think I'd be surprised if he got that many.
Next up, this one was the most surprising to me. TJ Watt. They set the under over on sacks at 13.5, which is really low. I don't know if Vegas thinks he's might be a little past his prime. Maybe injuries might catch up to him. The only way he doesn't get more than 13.5 is to get injured, right? I mean, that's the only way.
Yeah, I think it's over. I mean, they could be looking at a guy like Hayward, who had an off year last year, and they're looking at him not having enough help. uh, to sort of, but I think he's going to be over that.
I'm
It's
gonna
just hard
look
to
up real
understand
quick
how he
when the
wouldn't
last
be.
time his sack totals were that low. Well, actually, in 2022, he only had 12.
Wasn't he? Oh, wasn't he hurt though?
It's got to be the injuries, right? And then in
Yeah, I think he
2020, he
was
had
out.
10. Yeah.
Yeah,
So maybe
I
they're
think
looking at that. It's
I think
like,
it's
now that I look at it, it's every other year. He goes 10, 16, 12, 20. So maybe
they're
they're
probably
thinking
looking
it's,
at that, but most of that's been injury.
yeah.
So unless
Yeah.
they're just expecting injury, which I think is probably that has to be what's informing that, because otherwise it doesn't make sense.
And that's it for the Bet Online ones. I came up with a couple more of my own, though. So let's, Nick Herbig. I put him at 5 sacks for the under over. You think it goes under
I'd
or over?
say under. I'd say
Under.
under.
He did have 3 last year in very limited duty.
Yeah. Uh, I hope it's more.
Yeah, I think the Steelers
But
hope it's more too.
I think I'm going to go under. I'm going to say I'm hoping that Highsmith has a better year.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, they
Yeah,
also need to figure out what's going on with. I do think they bring in another guy too.
yeah.
Yeah, unless they really love Moon. Moon is still the mystery factor there, but
I
yeah,
meant to bring that up when we talked about it before. It's like you get the. I just have a feeling they really like Moon. I mean, they went after him immediately when he got
yeah,
put on waivers. Um, we don't know much about him. He hasn't played much. He had a good game against the Steelers last year, but that's the whole no, basically.
yeah.
Um, yeah, that'll be interesting. And if that's something that just dawned on me now, if Nick Herbig does have more than 5 sacks, does that mean one of the starters got hurt, which is not a good
Right.
situation either?
Well, that could be informing the that would inform the 12 sacks, whatever it was with Watt, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the less sacks Watt has, probably the more Herberg's going to have, hopefully.
exactly. Joey Porter Jr. I set it at 4 interceptions for the season. Under or over? He
Under.
only had under. Really?
Yeah,
I
I
think
don't
he
think
might
he's
go
gonna have
over.
four. He's not. I mean, I don't think he's. I think he'll have a couple. I mean, he's not. I don't. He doesn't strike me as that kind of corner, right? He's not a playmaking corner. He's a cover corner, kind of. And some guys who will give up a lot of big plays to make some big plays. I don't think he's a risk taker like that.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
To your point, didn't he have very few interceptions in college too? Now that
Yeah.
I think about it,
That
yeah,
was one of the knocks on him is he
yep.
was a little bit like Ike Taylor, right? In that kind of mold of it's a guy who's going to cover, but he's not going to make a ton of big plays.
Okay, next one up, Minka Fitzpatrick tackles. I
Yeah.
put it at 85. When I was looking at his stats, I was like, oh, he only had 64 last year, but that was 64 in 10 games.
Yeah.
So extrapolate that out, it's another 100 tackle season.
I'm going to say less just because I think the hope is that you've got a linebacking core that's going to make a lot of those plays. That's better than it was last year. So, and healthier, I think, and you've got another safety that I think is a little bit more stout against the run.
Yep.
So
Good
I'm
point. Yep.
hoping that, you don't need, and that hope they get off the field faster. They had a lot of, I don't know. I'm trying to remember. I don't think they were spectacular on third down. So
Mm-hmm.
hoping they get off the field a little bit faster, and that also eliminates some of those plays.
Yeah, Minka Fitzpatrick at his best is the center field robber, creating turnovers, not the 100+ tackle a season guy. You don't. He can do it, but you don't want him doing that. He's most effective.
And I think with the
Creating
guys they
turnovers.
brought in, uh, making a trade for a corner, I think, getting a safety that I think they really like. I think that helps position him back into that playmaker role. And you got Queen, and hopefully Peyton, Williams will get some. Peyton Wilson, excuse me, will get some time. That buys you more coverage skill underneath, so it just takes the pressure off of Minka to have to play those kinds of roles, and allows him to sort of be the guy that they want him to be most. I'm hoping that's the case.
Yeah, I think the Steelers are hoping that's the case as well.
Yeah.
Cam Hayward, I put the under over on 5 sacks this year.
Ooh.
Does Father Time get him?
I'm going to say like between 8. I'm going to say around 8.
Really?
Yeah. I think it's get more. I mean,
He's
how many
really
last
right around 5?
How much did he get last year?
2, but he was hurt.
Yeah, he was hurt. Yeah, I think it's going to be 8, around
Okay.
there, 7 or 8.
All right, we got a couple more. Russell Wilson, I put it at 3,000 yards passing. He had 3,118 last year. this goes to, do you think he's going to be a starter all season? Do you think he's going to be successful all season?
I'm going to say it's less because not because of his skill or ability, but because of the style of offense they want to play.
That's a good
Where
point.
they're not going to get it's going to be a run, 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 and if that offense is successful doing so, then obviously they're not going to have to pass as much, and they're going to eat up a lot of the clock, which means less attempts. I think it's going to be less, but not necessarily because of anything he's done wrong.
And I saw a stat where he was the league leader in checkdowns to running backs. So
Yeah,
that's going to eat away at his yard, and especially with the two guys he has, especially Jalen Warren. That's a good safety blanket to have. You can kind of get used to just
yeah,
checking it off to Jalen and letting him get you some yards. So, yeah, I think it might be under two. I'm fascinated. I want Russell Wilson to do well, but I'm also fascinated to see what Justin Fields would look like in this offense.
yeah.
This is a runner, you know?
I think he'd be really. Yeah, my fear is the stat with Fields that still stands out to me is that fourth quarter stat where he's just really not good in the fourth quarter, and for a team that aims to keep things close with strong defense and a run game that keeps it close, to have a guy who in the fourth quarter does not perform well is not a good recipe in my
Yeah.
mind, because that's, oddly enough, that's the one thing Pickett was pretty good at. Uh, but you had to wait 3 quarters basically to get him there. I think Fields is almost the opposite of that, and I don't know if that makes me feel good about an offense that is, or a team that's sort of predicated on the idea that we'll pull one out in the end. And
Yeah.
a quarterback who has shown the opposite does not inspire that stuff.
Doesn't inspire confidence. No. How much of that do you blame on the Chicago Bears and the train wreck that organization's been the last couple of years? Um,
I don't know. And it's a fair question. I just don't know. I just know statistically his numbers were really low in the fourth quarter, and I don't know what drives that. I don't know if that can be coached out. I think some of it seemed to be that when you have to pass because time does not allow you to run and do all those other things, that's when he struggled the most. When he had to pass, he struggled. So uh that's what I was saying.
all right, I got one last one for you. Keeping in the Justin Fields conversation. Justin Fields rushing touchdowns under over four. Keep in
Under.
mind the extra packages they might have for him and all that.
I don't think he's going to see the field, barring horrible play or of Wilson or injury to Wilson. I don't think he's going to. He may see some spot duty here or there, but I think it's going to require a lot of poor play or injury on Wilson's part. I don't think they want to get into much like last year with Mason and Pick and all. I don't think they want to get within a mile of a quarterback controversy. So I
Yeah.
don't think he's going to get a chance to provide that kind of controversy unless something has really gone south.
I don't know if you saw it, but Diana Rossini had posted that the Steelers have a package or multiple packages in place for Justin Fields. I don't know. Obviously, we don't know where she gets that information from.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, when you think about it, is he the second most dynamic offensive weapon on the team behind George Pickens?
Might be
I
the
mean,
first.
yeah, you might be the first. You're right.
Yeah.
I get where you're coming from with the quarterback controversy, and I don't know if they can avoid that part of it because the first game that Russell Wilson struggles, this is going to come up in a big
Yeah.
way. In a
It's going
big
to be
way.
tough. And what I fear is, but the thing is, like Fields, the most loved position in all of sports is the backup quarterback. I get that,
Absolutely.
but it's, you know, I think for a coach, it's one thing as a fan to say, oh, you know what, Fields has got to be better. But I think as a coach, what Fields brings. And I'm not sure he brings much more in the passing game than Wilson does. So, you know, is the hope that you're going to have a Lamar Jackson basically kind of guy. But Lamar
Yeah.
Jackson, I think, is a much better passer than
Oh yeah.
Fields shown.
Yeah, for sure.
So, you know, that's why I'm just really like, I love having him as a backup because I think he's just, he can win some games at times with his legs and make a couple plays in the passing game, but just generally, I don't think he's right now a good starting quarterback. Again, I think it's going to take a lot of work with him to get him there, and creating special packages, all that. I have mixed feelings about that kind of stuff. It just feels like I'm the kind of guy who's like, this is the base. Keep it there, like with the whole offensive line. Get those guys to gel early and keep them together. Don't play around with this shit. Let them get accommodated with let them get comfortable. I'm the same way with the offense. Don't keep bringing people in and out. It breaks up the offense. It makes it hard for players to get their timing right when you got two different quarterbacks in there. Hard to get a flow. And that's why I'm not a coach, because I'm pretty like, this is the way it should be, and maybe I'm wrong, but it just feels like that's just messing with stuff, and I don't love that. That feels desperate to me.
um, I mean, it could get desperate at times, right?
Yeah, it might.
I just see that the athlete that Justin Fields is just rotting on the bench when you could
Yeah.
probably, I'm 3, 4 plays a game, 4 or 5 plays a game, get a first down, get a touchdown, make a big play if the offense is struggling. Um, yeah, but I do get your point. It takes the offense out of rhythm when you switch quarterbacks, and
And if you're
they're
putting him in there for a series, it's sort of like over the course of a game, it's easy to trick other teams. But if he's in for a series, it's sort of like, okay, you kind of know he's not going to check it down, right? So you either know it's going to be a big long pass or he's going to run it, right?
yeah,
So it's like it feels like you're kind of limited in what you can do, and the defense knows that, because he's not going to, like, Justin Fields doesn't come in and throw a 5-yard swing pass to Jalen Warren, right? That's not what
yeah.
they're going to do with him. So it kind of limits on an odd sort of way what you're doing on offense, and the defense, a smart defense, is going to know that. It just feels like that to me.
Yeah, you make a good point. It does limit them a little bit in the special packages. How we would do as a starter, it's interesting. I don't. Again, it goes back to how much do you believe that Chicago was just a train wreck, and
Yeah.
that I don't know. I don't pay attention to the Bears as much as others do. I do remember watching games where they would just take Justin Fields and use him as a runner and just pound him and pound him. He'd get up holding his shoulder or his leg, and then they'd call a quarterback run the very next play. And it stood out to me because I saw it over and over again. It's like they gave up on him and said, "Well, we're just going to use him as a runner and try to win that way." And I don't know, that eats away at a quarterback's confidence. It
Yeah.
doesn't do anything for his, if you're trying to play quarterback injured, you're trying to throw passes and your shoulders hurt.
Yeah.
So I wonder about that.
I think we'll see a lot in camp and preseason. And if he's looking good, if he's looking really good in preseason, but we've seen that story before too, where
Yeah,
quarterbacks look
yes, we
really
have.
good in preseason, and when
Kenny Pickett.
reality kicks in against not so vanilla defenses anymore. I mean, that was the knock on him, is that he was having a hard time reading defenses and a hard
Mhm.
time making the big time throws in big time situations, and you only see that in real games. So that's the concern, is that you won't know until he's in there playing a game that matters. And in
Yeah.
that case, like, is it, you don't want to find out that he's not that guy then.
All right. That's all I have for the over unders. But sticking to the quarterback thing before we wrap this up, I saw something again online. Uh, People, trying to connect the dots between if this goes badly and the Steelers are looking for a new quarterback in 2025.
Mhm.
What are your feelings on Dak Prescott as an option? Um,
I'd love it. I would love it. I think he is. Look, I think he's a lot better than who's on the Steelers roster now. I think I don't see it happening, but I'd love to see it happen, because I think he's dynamic enough to, in the scheme that Pittsburgh wants to run, where we're not throwing the ball downfield every play. I think he could really shine in that kind of offense where the pressure is not solely on his shoulders. I think Dallas really threw everything on his shoulders, and he's not Patrick Mahomes, right? So
mhm.
I think that using him in a way that sort of allows him to still play to his strengths, but doesn't put the whole offense on his shoulders, I think he would excel in that kind of environment. And I think he'd do really well in Pittsburgh. I'd love to see it.
I agree 100%. I'm not the biggest Dak Prescott fan in the world. I think his playoff performances have lacked a little bit, but I think for everything you said, it's absolutely right. I think he's perfect for a Mike Tomlin Arthur Smith offense.
Yeah.
I just think it's a perfect fit. As you said, take some of the weight of the whole offense off his shoulders and just let him. He's above average game manager, which is what the Steelers need. And he's got a good arm. He can make some big plays. Got a little bend in him. He's hard to tackle. He's a big guy. Yeah, I mean, if all else fails, Fields and Russell Wilson don't do well, and it's supposed to be a weak draft, and I don't know what else will be in free agency. I'd rather have him than quite a few other options that are going to be out there at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean it's there aren't a ton of options next year. So even if look, I'd be hard pressed to see Wilson here next year. Maybe, but I'd be surprised just because I feel like the next contract, if he does, it's kind of a tough situation because the next contract he would sign would be a big one.
Yep.
And do you want to sign a guy who's in his 30s? Get it's quarterback, so it's a little bit different kind of concern at age.
Yeah.
But unless he has a really great year, I mean, I think my fear is he's going to have a good year, right? And what do you do with a quarterback in his 30s who's good but not great? And so I'd love to see them look at Fields. Is Fields the guy or not? And then make a decision on a guy like Dak Prescott accordingly. If Fields is the guy, I think Fields would love to stay in Pittsburgh, learn under Wilson, stay in Pittsburgh. He seems like he loves the idea. It's probably going to be a night and day experience for him between Chicago and Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And I think that's a selling point for Pittsburgh, certainly to get for him to want to resign there. But he's got to be the guy. So if he's not looking like the guy, then go great guns and get the Dak Prescott or I don't know who else there is even to get, but I can't think.
Probably be the best free agent by a good margin. The problem with that is, what is that going to cost you? Because and there's already talk that he's looking for $50 million per from Dallas and a new contract. That's a lot of money for above average game manager that we've discussed here.
Yeah, I agree. They're not going to pay him that.
Yeah, then they're not going to get him because I mean, Mike Tomlin's worked some magic before on these players and got him to sign for less. But yeah, I don't think Dak's that guy. I mean, he's always held out for the last dollar in Dallas.
Yeah.
He had a big contract, holdout / whatever the last time around. And I'm sure, I don't know. Would he take
They've
less?
got like
a little less?
5 or 6 key free agents to sign next year. They got Hayward. They've got Warren or Najee. They've got those guys to work. Freiermuth, certainly. They've got it. Whatever that happens at quarterback is going to be a lot more expensive than it is now. Daniels is probably going to walk.
Yeah.
But they also have a corner situation now because, he's a free agent next year, not Porter.
Dante Jackson, yeah.
In fact, Dante Jackson's a free agent. So what do they do about that? So all these things are, they require a lot of money. So I do think that there's some big decisions they're going to have to make, and I fear like paying $50 million for a quarterback is not going to be one of them that they're going to do.
Yeah, what I fear the most is it's early, but it's supposed to be a weak quarterback draft, and we do the Kenny Pickett 2.0 where we force and draft a quarterback who may not be great because you think you can fix them or change them or they're better than, and then we do this all over again.
I don't think they're going to do that. I think they'd sign Fields, and before they do that, honestly, I think that they would ride with Fields and hope they can get some magic there, or re-sign Wilson even if he has a good year. I don't think they're going to make that mistake again.
I hope not.
Yeah.
And just one last thing, you're absolutely right on Russell Wilson. It goes, if he has a really good season, he's going to cost you too much. He's going to want a big contract.
I don't think he'll cost too much. I think only because I think
we're looking at what? Even at a discount, 30 to $40 million a year.
I I wonder what he'd sign for in Pittsburgh. Right? I mean, the fact that he signed for what he signed for tells you a little bit of something about the guy, right? He could have signed elsewhere, I'm sure. I mean, there's even as a backup, someone would have signed him for more than what he signed for in Pittsburgh. So I think, I think there's a lot of behind the scenes conversation. Look, we're going to sign you this contract now with the promise that if you do really well, we're going to sign you this other contract or not. I don't know, but I do feel like I don't think he's going to have that Dak Prescott mentality. And maybe Dak Prescott coming into Pittsburgh wouldn't either. Some of these negotiations, just because you're just, this team is that you're playing for now. If you're going to play for them, you're going to play for more than for someone else because you don't like it there. Like you have to pay me a premium to stay, kind of thing.
Yeah, and if they can look past it and see how good the fit is, maybe that changes their mind a little bit. Because, like we said, I think. And look, again, I'm not the biggest Dak Prescott fan in the world. In a vacuum, I probably wouldn't want him. But for this team, the way they play, the way they want to play, I think he's a great fit.
I agree. And there's probably going to be someone else, like every year, someone pops up that no one thought would, So there could be, and it's not going to be Mahomes, but, there could be someone like that pops up. Who knows? Things happen. Maybe Kirk Cousins gets really angry and doesn't like where he is in Atlanta. Who knows?
I mean, that's totally possible with them drafting a quarterback and not that whole circus there that they didn't tell him. That's definitely a possibility too. All right, Ron, I appreciate you coming on. Training camp starts Wednesday. Can't wait. Get some news out of there. See how these players are doing.
Real conversation. Some real good topics. Finally, yeah.
Yeah.
All we need to know about Pittsburgh but for the team by the end of next week. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll all have our opinions formed by then. Exactly. 3 days. That's all we need.
That's all we need.
All right, Ron, you got anything to plug before we get out of here? Any good interviews coming up?
Just I had a really interesting one with a former Steeler who's in prison, and I interviewed him while he was in prison. Committed murder.
Wow.
Yeah, really interesting conversation. Really likable guy, just happened to stab a guy 28 times. So, that's
an interesting conversation.
It was interesting, and you're doing it through Zoom, looking at him in his cell.
Wow.
It was really like first time clear I've done that. So that'll be an interesting conversation. I'll post at some point soon. Some other interesting ones too. So we'll get those out soon.
Yeah, don't forget to check out Ron's stuff. He's got a lot of great interviews on his site. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, guys. That helps us out a lot. And until next time, thanks for listening to the Steelers Sanctuary Podcast. We'll catch you next time.
Yep.